There are moments when you can be surrounded by people, responsibilities, and a life you worked so hard to build and still feel as though you cannot find yourself anywhere inside it. And when that happens, what hurts the most is not only the confusion, it is the quiet fear that you may never feel like yourself again. You may have been carrying that feeling longer than anyone knows. You may smile when needed, answer messages, go to work, make dinner, keep promises, and continue showing up for a life that looks intact from the outside, while inside something feels strangely far away. Like you are reaching for your own hand in the dark and coming up empty. I want you to hear this very gently and very clearly. You are not failing at life because you feel lost. You are not weak because your old certainties no longer comfort you. And you are not imagining the heaviness of this season. Something in you recognizes that the way you have been living, thinking, striving, pleasing, enduring, or pretending can no longer hold the truth of who you are becoming. That matters, because so many people spend years trying to fix the feeling of being lost without ever understanding what lostness actually is. They think it means they have made wrong choices. They think it means they have drifted too far, waited too long, missed the right chance, loved the wrong person, trusted the wrong dream, or failed to become the person they were supposed to be by now. And so they panic, they rush, they pressure themselves, they search harder, they scroll longer, they ask everyone around them for answers, they beg life to explain itself. And all the while, the deeper self grows quieter, not because it has abandoned them, but because it cannot be heard through the noise of self-rejection. So I want to sit with you here for a moment in this exact place where you are, not the polished version of you, not the strong version, not the version who already knows how the story ends. You, as you are now. The one who may be tired of carrying invisible questions. The one who may be waking up with a heavy heart. The one who may feel pulled between wanting change and being afraid of what that change will ask of you. Your heart already knows this. There are seasons when being lost is not a mistake. It is a passage. And passages rarely feel graceful while you are inside them. Have you noticed that? The most important changes in life often do not announce themselves as transformation. They arrive as confusion, as restlessness, as a strange inability to keep pretending that everything is fine, as tears with no clear cause, as sudden exhaustion, as old dreams losing their color, as the growing ache of knowing you cannot go back to who you were, even if you do not yet know who you are becoming. That in-between place can feel unbearable, not because it is empty, but because it is so full of endings your mind has not learned to honor yet. Sometimes you are not lost in the way you think. Sometimes you are standing in the sacred space between identities. The old self has loosened. The old map no longer fits. The old roles no longer explain you. The old ways of earning love, safety, approval, and direction are no longer working. And because they are no longer working, your mind assumes something is wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the disorientation you feel is not proof of failure at all? What if it is evidence that something untrue is falling away? Let that settle for a moment. Because if you begin here, everything begins to change. The whole emotional weather of this season shifts when you stop calling it failure and start recognizing it as transition. You soften, your breathing changes, your body stops bracing against itself. You stop demanding an immediate answer from a frightened mind. And in that little bit of softness, another kind of guidance becomes possible. Here is what I have come to understand. The moments when life begins to turn are rarely the moments when you finally control everything. They are the moments when you stop speaking to yourself like an enemy. This is important to hear. When you feel lost, there is usually a sentence running quietly beneath all the noise. Maybe it says, "I should know by now." Maybe it says, "I am behind." Maybe it says, "What is wrong with me?" Maybe it says, "I always do this." Maybe it says, "I have ruined everything." Maybe it says, "I am too old, too late, too broken, too confused to start again." That sentence matters more than most people realize, because the words you repeat in moments of confusion do not merely describe your experience. They shape the emotional climate in which your experience unfolds. They tell your nervous system whether it is safe to open or whether it must brace. They tell your heart whether it is being met with compassion or criticism. They tell your subconscious what story to keep proving true. They tell life what frequency you are rehearsing. And if you have been whispering defeat to yourself while asking life to breathe, Nang Yu peace, you can feel the contradiction in your own body. You've felt it, haven't you? That split between the part of you trying so hard to stay hopeful and the deeper part of you that is exhausted from being pushed. So today, I want to offer you a different sentence. A sentence you can say when you feel lost. A sentence that does not demand that you already know the answer. A sentence that does not force you into false positivity. A sentence that does not shame the pain away. A sentence that creates enough safety inside you for truth to return. Here it is. Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step. Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step, not the whole plan, not the final outcome, not a perfect map. The next small step. Do you feel the kindness in that? Do you feel the spaciousness? This is not a sentence that says you must become certain overnight. It does not say you need to understand the entire reason for your pain before sunrise. It does not say you have to manifest an answer immediately, prove your strength, or perform your healing. It simply opens the door. It reminds your frightened mind that guidance can exist before clarity. It reminds your wounded heart that direction can return one gentle step at a time. And yes, I said willing, because willingness is powerful. Willingness is softer than force and far more transformational. A willing heart can heal. A willing breath can receive. A willing mind can loosen its grip. a willing body can begin to trust again. You do not have to feel perfect faith in order to say these words. You do not have to fully believe them at first. You only need enough honesty to admit that the way you have been holding yourself is no longer working, and enough openness to try another way. Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step. Say it inwardly for a moment. Notice what happens in your chest. Notice whether some part of you relaxes or resists. Both are welcome, because healing is not measured by how instantly peaceful you become. Healing is measured by your willingness to meet what is true with gentleness. If resistance comes up, that does not mean the words are wrong. It means they are reaching a place in you that has been living without softness for a very long time. And perhaps that is where we need to begin. Not with your future, not with your goals, not with the decision you think you should have made already, but with the way you have been holding yourself in the dark. I know this season may not have been easy. I know there may be parts of you that are ashamed of how disoriented you feel. Perhaps you compare yourself to who you used to be. Perhaps you remember a time when you moved through life with certainty, when your choices felt clear, when your energy was strong, when your dreams felt alive in your body. And now you may look at yourself and wonder where that person went. But the answer is not that they disappeared. The answer is that you have changed. And change, real change, often creates a temporary kind of homelessness inside the self. You outgrow old truths before you can inhabit new ones. You release identities before new language arrives. You stop fitting places, people, ambitions, rhythms, and expectations before you know what will replace them. This is why the soul's transitions can feel so lonely. There is often no outer marker for them, no ceremony, no applause, no clear social permission to stop and say, something deep inside me is rearranging, and I do not yet know how to live from this new place. So you carry it quietly. You keep functioning. You tell yourself to be grateful. You call it stress or hormones or overthinking or burnout or a rough patch. And maybe some of that is true. We honor the body. We honor the seasons of mental and emotional exhaustion. We honor the need for care, for rest, for support, for wise professional guidance when that is needed. But beneath all of that, there may also be a sacred truth asking to be named. The truth that something in you is no longer willing to live without deeper alignment. That is not weakness. That is awakening. Sometimes awakening does not feel like light pouring through the ceiling. Sometimes it feels like you cannot keep lying to yourself. Sometimes it feels like the job that once defined you no longer touches your soul. Sometimes it feels like the relationship that once made sense now leaves you lonelier than solitude. Sometimes it feels like the home you built, the routines you trusted, the beliefs you inherited, the goals you chased, the version of success you were taught to worship, all begin to lose their power to reassure you. And when that happens, you may think you are lost. But what if you are actually becoming honest? that changes everything. Because honesty is one of the first doors back to the self. Not harsh honesty, not the kind that wounds. I mean compassionate honesty, the kind that says, this no longer fits. The kind that says, I am tired in a way that sleep alone cannot fix. The kind that says, I miss myself. The kind that says, I have been living so far from my own truth that I can no longer hear my own inner voice clearly. What if that honesty is not the end of your stability, but the beginning of your return? There is something most people are not told when they begin to walk through an identity shift. The mind wants direction, but the soul often begins with dismantling. And dismantling feels like disorder until you understand its purpose. A seed does not become a tree by staying intact. It opens in darkness. It breaks the shape it used to be. It stops looking like itself before it reveals what it always carried inside. And if you judged the seed only by that breaking open moment, you might think something had gone terribly wrong. But life knows what it is doing in hidden places. Your heart already knows this too. There are parts of you that have been trying to protect you by clinging to certainty, by keeping routines, by pleasing others, by staying needed, useful, busy, agreeable, predictable, by making sure you do not disappoint anyone, by making sure you do not risk too much, by asking for less, by shrinking your knowing because your knowing might disrupt the structure of your life. And when all of that stops working, you call yourself lost. But maybe you are not lost. Maybe you are no longer willing to abandon yourself in order to feel safe. That is a very different story. And stories matter. Because the story you tell about this season becomes the container your healing has to live inside. If the story is, I am a mess, then every emotion becomes proof. If the story is, I am too late, then every delay becomes evidence. If the story is, I have no idea what I am doing, then every pause becomes panic. But if the story begins to soften into something truer, something like, I am in transition, or a deeper truth is rearranging my life, or life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step, then your whole inner atmosphere begins to shift. Not because all the answers have arrived, but because you are no longer at war with the process. And this is where life begins to turn around fast. Not always in outer events right away, not always in dramatic changes, but in the most important place first. Inside the relationship you have with your own being. A turned around life begins with a turned around inner conversation. I want to stay here for a little while because this is deeper than many people realize. When you are lost, your mind often becomes louder, faster, sharper. It wants resolution immediately. It becomes obsessed with finding the right decision, the right plan, the right explanation, the right spiritual method, the right next chapter. It tells you that peace is waiting on the other side of certainty. But the heart does not work that way. The heart opens in safety. The body settles in kindness. The deeper wisdom rises when it is not being interrogated. So if you have been sitting in your confusion demanding answers from yourself, it is no wonder you feel overwhelmed. You have been trying to force guidance from the same inner environment that made guidance impossible to hear. What if you stopped asking, "What is my whole life supposed to become?" What if instead you asked, "What would create a little more truth, a little more gentleness, a little more aliveness today?" Can you feel the difference? One question creates pressure, the other creates relationship. One makes the self into a problem to solve. The other makes the self into someone to listen to. And listening changes everything. This is why the phrase matters so much. Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step. It interrupts the old emergency. It loosens the demand for total certainty. It brings the soul's language into the room. It tells the frightened part of you that you do not have to drag tomorrow into today in order to feel safe. You only need the next small step. And often that step is not dramatic at all. It may be resting instead of forcing. It may be telling the truth in one conversation. It may be going outside for 10 minutes and feeling your feet on the earth. It may be writing down what hurts instead of pretending you are fine. It may be drinking water, canceling one obligation, turning off the noise, asking for support, taking a walk without your phone, or letting yourself admit that the plan you built no longer reflects the person you are now. Never underestimate the holiness of small, honest steps. Lives turn when one true step becomes possible. Not because the step is grand, but because it is aligned. And aligned steps multiply. They open inner space. They restore self-respect. They teach the nervous system that movement can happen without violence. They show the subconscious a new pattern. They create momentum that feels like peace instead of panic. This is how real transformation works. It is often much quieter than the world teaches us. It does not always arrive with fireworks. It arrives with relief, with resonance, with the soft but unmistakable feeling that something in you has stopped fighting. I once knew someone who kept saying she had lost herself. She said it so often that the words had become part of her identity. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I got here. And the more she repeated those sentences, the more powerless she felt. Not because they were evil words, but because they kept her circling the same doorway without ever walking through it. One morning, after a long season of heartbreak and exhaustion, she changed one sentence. Only one. She put her hand over her chest and said, "I am still here, and life is showing me how to begin again." That was all. Nothing around her changed that day. Her circumstances were still complicated. Her grief was still real. Her questions were still unanswered. But something inside her softened enough for guidance to enter. She stopped treating herself like a failed project and started treating herself like someone in a sacred transition. And that changed everything. You are being offered that same turning point now. Not because you need to imitate someone else's journey, but because the principle is true. The words spoken into the moment of disorientation either deepen the wound or become medicine. So let us look closely at why these words work. Life is guiding me now. This first part restores relationship with something larger than your fear. Call it life, call it God, call it divine intelligence, call it love, call it your higher self, call it the wisdom of your own soul. The name matters less than the felt truth beneath it. You are not unsupported in this moment. Even here, even in the uncertainty, even in the pause, even in the tears. Guidance is not absent because clarity is incomplete. The next part matters too, and I am willing. Willingness is where the locked door begins to open. A mind full of certainty can remain closed. A heart full of fear can remain defended. But willingness creates a crack in the wall. It says, I do not know everything, but I am open. It says, I have been hurting, but I am still reachable. It says, I have been disappointed, but I am not closed to life. It says, I am not asking for perfection. I am making room for movement. And then to trust the next small step, not the 10-year vision, not the grand reinvention, the next small step. This phrase is deeply healing because it brings your spirit, mind, and body into the same room. The spirit remembers guidance. The mind is given a manageable focus. The body is relieved of the impossible demand to solve everything at once. No wonder something begins to turn. Have you noticed how often suffering grows when we argue with the size of the step that is actually ours? Life offers one honest movement, and the mind says, that's not enough. Life offers rest, and the mind demands strategy. Life offers a conversation, and the mind wants guarantees. Life offers a pause, and the mind says pausing means failure. But the soul knows the rhythm of real change. It knows that clarity ripens. It knows that next steps reveal themselves in sequence. It knows that forcing a future you cannot yet embody only creates more inner division. You have been carrying this for so long, haven't you? That pressure to know everything, to get it right, to stop wasting time, to fix yourself fast, to become a better version overnight. No wonder you're tired. No wonder your inner voice became faint. No wonder you began to feel lost. Sometimes what we call lostness is actually the collapse of unnatural pressure. And yes, I said collapse, because not everything falling apart is a tragedy. Some things fall apart because they were built around a version of you that no longer belongs at the center of your life. Maybe you built a life around being the one who copes, the one who gives, the one who accommodates, the one who performs strength, the one who never asks for too much. the one who keeps everything moving, the one who earns worth by being needed. And somewhere deep inside, your true self began to whisper, "I cannot live here forever." If that is happening for you, you are not losing your way. You are losing your tolerance for self-betrayal. That is sacred, and it must be met with tenderness, because the old ways did not emerge for no reason. They protected you once. They helped you survive. They made you lovable in certain rooms. They kept peace in certain homes. They made you successful in certain systems. They earned approval where authenticity may not have been safe. So when those patterns begin to loosen, you may feel terrified. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because the self that adapted so beautifully is afraid of what will happen if you stop living that way. This is why harsh affirmations do not work. This is why forcing positivity does not last. The deeper parts of you do not respond to command. They respond to safety. Your body already recognizes this truth. If I say to you, "Everything is perfect, stop worrying," some part of you will likely tighten. Not because you are negative, but because the statement skips over your lived reality. It does not honor what hurts. It does not build trust. But if you say, "Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step," something more honest becomes possible. The sentence does not deny the darkness. It becomes a lantern inside it. This is why language can be healing when it is rooted in truth instead of performance. And there is another layer here, one people rarely speak about. Feeling lost is not always only emotional or spiritual. Sometimes it is deeply physical. The nervous system can become so overloaded by stress, grief, change, disappointment, over-responsibility, and chronic self-pressure that your inner compass becomes hard to access. You cannot think clearly because your system is bracing. You cannot sense what you want because you are in survival. You cannot trust your intuition because your body has learned to anticipate danger before possibility. If this is true for you, please let that bring some compassion. You are not broken. You may be tired, overstimulated, undernourished, grieving, burned out, lonely, emotionally overextended, carrying old pain in a body that has been asked to keep going long after it needed gentleness. That matters. And this is why the phrase is not only spiritual, it is regulating. When spoken slowly, with breath, with a hand on the body, with presence, it begins to send a new message inward. Not an exaggerated message, a steady one. Guidance exists. I do not have to know everything. One step is enough. I can soften now. I can live from here. Would you try something with me now? Place a hand on your heart or somewhere on your body that feels kind. Your chest, your belly, your throat, your cheek. Somewhere that helps you feel present. Take a breath that you do not force and quietly say, "Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step." Again, life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step. Notice whether your shoulders soften even a little. Notice whether there is resistance. Notice whether tears rise. Notice whether some part of you wants to say, "I hope so." That hope matters too, because hope does not always arrive as confidence. Sometimes it arrives as a small softening, as a lessening of inner attack, as a breath you did not know you were holding, as the first moment in a long time when you stop demanding that your pain become productive before it is worthy of compassion. That is a turning point. Do not underestimate these inner turning points. They may not be visible on a calendar. They may not impress anyone. They may not even feel dramatic, but they change the soil in which your next season grows, and the soil matters. No one plants in concrete and expects a garden. Yet so many people try to grow a new life inside an inner climate of criticism, urgency, comparison, and shame. They ask their heart to open while speaking to it harshly. They ask clarity to come while punishing themselves for not having it. They ask for peace while living in constant self-interrogation. No wonder they feel stuck. The first miracle is not outer direction. The first miracle is inner permission. Permission to not know everything yet. Permission to be in process. Permission to be tired without calling yourself lazy. Permission to have changed. Permission to outgrow what once fit. Permission to move slowly enough to hear yourself again. Permission to tell the truth about what is no longer working. Permission to let your healing be quieter than performance culture taught you it should be. This permission is not indulgence, it is wisdom, and wisdom changes pace. That is another reason life can appear to turn around fast once you begin speaking differently to yourself. It is not that life suddenly became easier. It is that you stopped adding unnecessary suffering to what was already hard. You stopped creating second pain on top of first pain. First pain is the loss, the uncertainty, the transition, the heartbreak, the exhaustion, the unanswered question. Second pain is the sentence, "I should be over this." First pain is the confusion. Second pain is, "What is wrong with me?" First pain is not knowing. Second pain is, "I'm failing because I don't know." When you remove second pain, the whole experience becomes more workable. This is why compassionate truth is so powerful. It reduces the violence in the system. And in reduced violence, guidance becomes possible. If you've been craving solitude intensely lately, it may be because your inner world is trying to become audible again. If old roles have begun to feel heavy, it may be because your soul is no longer willing to trade authenticity for approval. If your usual ways of coping are no longer comforting you, it may be because they were never meant to carry you into this next season. If nothing feels the same anymore, it may be because you are not the same person you were. These are not punishments. They are signals. The question is not whether life is speaking. The question is whether you are creating enough tenderness within yourself to hear what it is saying. And tenderness is a practice. It is built in moments. It is built when you catch the old sentence and choose another. It is built when you stop saying, "I am a mess," and begin saying, "I am in a tender season, and I am learning to stay with myself." It is built when you stop saying, "I have ruined my life," and begin saying, "I am listening for what wants to change." It is built when you stop saying, "I should know," and begin saying, "The next step will become clear." It is built when you stop saying, "I am alone in this," and begin saying, "Life is guiding me now." Can you feel how each one of these creates a different world inside the body? That is not small. That is architecture. You are building an inner home. And perhaps this is the deeper truth beneath feeling lost. You have been searching outside for a map while life has been inviting you inward to build a place inside yourself where truth can return. The home you need most right now is not a final answer. It is a kinder relationship with your own unfolding. When that home begins to form, direction comes differently. It no longer arrives as panic-fueled certainty. It arrives as resonance, as a quiet yes, as a subtle pull, as a conversation that lingers in your heart, as an opportunity that feels clean rather than frantic, as an idea that gives energy instead of draining it, the sudden realization that something you have been forcing no longer deserves your force. This is what trust looks like in real life. Not blind optimism, not pretending, not bypassing. Trust is often much humbler than that. Trust is answering the email you've been avoiding because it contains a truth. Trust is admitting you need rest. Trust is choosing honesty over image. Trust is saying no without building a courtroom in your head. Trust is allowing grief to be grief. Trust is going slowly enough to hear what your own spirit is trying to say. And yes, life can begin to turn around quickly when you do this. Because confusion feeds on fragmentation. The moment you begin to come back into relationship with yourself, the fragmentation lessens. Your energy begins returning from all the places you left it. The outer world may still take time to rearrange, but the inner world becomes livable again. And a livable inner world changes the choices you make, the energy you bring, the boundaries you keep, the love you accept, the work you can continue, and the life you are willing to build. This is how inner language becomes outer reality, not as magic tricks, as alignment. There is something happening in these moments of lostness that many people miss. The self you are becoming often requires different conditions than the self you used to be. Different rhythms, different relationships, different standards of honesty, different ways of resting, different kinds of beauty, different boundaries, different nourishment, different definitions of success, different conversations with time itself. And if you keep trying to force your current self to live inside old conditions, your body will keep signaling discomfort. That discomfort is not betrayal, it is information. Listen to the places where life feels heavy in a way that does not make sense anymore. Listen to the commitments that drain you long before you arrive. Listen to the spaces where your body tightens, even when your mind says you should be grateful. Listen to the dreams you keep dismissing because they seem inconvenient. Listen to the grief you keep postponing. Listen to the fatigue that rest alone has not yet touched. Your soul speaks through all of this. And when you meet those signals with the phrase, "Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step," you are not escaping reality. You are entering it more honestly. That honesty might begin to show you things. It might show you that your lostness is tangled with grief you never gave language to. Grief for time. Grief for who you thought you would be by now. Grief for the version of love you wanted. Grief for the years you spent surviving. Grief for the voice you silenced. Grief for the body you criticized. Grief for the dreams you placed on a shelf while meeting everyone else's needs. Grief for how long you have been hard on yourself. Let that settle for a moment. Because sometimes when you say you feel lost, what you really mean is that you have not yet fully grieved the selves and seasons that ended without the ceremony. And grief must be honored, not rushed, not fixed, not turned into a productivity project. Honored. Grief is one of the soul's languages. It tells the truth about love, change, endings, and value. It shows you where life mattered. It reveals what was real. It reveals what was hoped for. It reveals what can no longer be carried in silence. So if tears rise when you say the phrase, let them. If sadness comes, let it have breath. If anger comes, let it be witnessed kindly. If numbness comes, meet that with patience too. You do not need to perform the right spiritual response. You only need to stay in relationship. Life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step. Maybe the next small step is grieving what ended. Maybe it is forgiving yourself for not knowing how to protect yourself sooner. Maybe it is admitting that you have been lonely. Maybe it is recognizing that you have been measuring your worth through roles that no longer fit. Maybe it is allowing yourself to want more without making yourself wrong for it. Maybe it is realizing that the life turning around begins with you no longer turning against yourself. This is the deeper miracle. And it is available now, not because you have earned it, but because it is your nature to return. Somewhere deep inside, you have always known how to come home to yourself. You may have forgotten the path. You may have been distracted by survival. You may have built a life around endurance. You may have learned to look outward for every answer. But the wisdom has not vanished. It has been waiting beneath the noise. That is why certain words feel like medicine. They do not implant truth. They awaken remembered truth. Your heart already knows this. It knows what false rushing feels like. It knows what self-abandonment feels like. It knows the cost of living too long in performance. It knows the ache of staying where your spirit is shrinking. It knows the exhaustion of carrying everything alone. And it also knows relief. It knows the relief of one honest breath, the relief of one true sentence, the relief of one small boundary, the relief of one conversation where you stop pretending, the relief of one morning where you decide not to attack yourself, the relief of one moment where you say, I am still here. You are still here. This matters more than you realize. Because even in your confusion, some part of you kept reaching for truth. Some part of you kept listening, kept hoping, kept searching not for a performance, but for something real. That reaching is sacred. It tells me that life inside you has not gone dormant. It tells me there is still movement, still openness, still a future trying to meet you. And perhaps this is the moment you begin to meet it differently. Not with more force, not with more self-judgment, not with another frantic attempt to reinvent yourself in a weekend, but with a hand on your heart, with your breath in your body, with the sentence, life is guiding me now, and I am willing to trust the next small step. Say it in the kitchen, say it in the car, say it before sleep, say it when you wake in the dark, say it after a difficult conversation, say it before making a decision, say it when the old panic returns, say it when the future feels too large, say it when you feel tempted to speak cruelly to yourself. Let it become a bridge, a returning place, a frequency, a home. Because repetition matters, not empty repetition, living repetition, the kind that deepens each time. At first, you may say it as a possibility. Then you may say it as a lifeline. Then you may say it as a remembrance. Then one day, you may notice you are living from it. The next small step becomes how you move through everything. You stop asking life for certainty before movement. You begin honoring resonance. You begin respecting your energy. You begin trusting what softens you instead of what performs well for others. You begin noticing what nourishes. You begin seeing how many of your old choices were made from fear rather than truth. And none of this needs to become a reason for shame. It becomes information. It becomes wisdom. It becomes the compassion with which you hold the years that brought you here. We do not heal by making the old self wrong. We heal by understanding what it needed and thanking it for carrying us until we were ready for something truer. This is where self-love becomes real, not decorative, not performative. Real self-love is the decision to stop using your own inner voice as a weapon. Real self-love is choosing language your body can survive. Real self-love is allowing the lost part of you to be held, not hurried. Real self-love is understanding that confusion is not cured by contempt. Real self-love is building an internal climate where clarity has a chance to grow. And yes, life often turns quickly when this begins, because self-love restores energy that has been leaking through self-rejection for years. Imagine how much life force returns when you stop arguing with your own becoming. Imagine how much clarity returns when you stop spending so much energy trying to be someone you have already outgrown. Imagine how much peace returns when you stop making every pause mean failure. Imagine what becomes possible when the one voice you hear most often inside yourself becomes a voice of steadiness rather than attack. That is not a small change. That is a new foundation, and foundations matter more than appearances. Many people build beautiful-looking lives on foundations of self-abandonment. They look fine from the outside, capable, productive, admirable, strong, but inside there is no place to rest, no place to tell the truth, no place to be fully human without punishment. You may be here because life is asking you to build differently now, to build from wholeness, to build from truth, to build from enoughness, to build from the understanding that your value was never meant to be earned through exhaustion, to build from the knowing that guidance is not something you force from the universe, but something you notice when you become available to yourself, and availability is sacred. Ask yourself gently, have you been available to yourself lately? Not useful to everyone else, not productive, not efficient, not admired, available. Have you sat with your own sadness without trying to fix it immediately? Have you listened to what your body says no to? Have you made room for your own desire without negotiating it away? Have you stopped long enough to hear what hurts? Have you told yourself the truth about what you need? These are not small questions. They are the doorways through which the lost self returns, and it does return. The self you miss is not gone. It may be deeper now, more honest, less willing to perform, less interested in approval, less available for false peace, more tender, more discerning, more rooted in what matters. Sometimes you do not get your old self back because you are being invited into a truer self. That can feel like loss until you understand it as evolution. If people have been falling away from your life, it may be because your frequency of honesty is changing. If old ambitions no longer excite you, it may be because your soul wants meaning that success alone cannot provide. If your body keeps asking for rest, it may be because rest is not a detour from your life right now. It is how your life reorganizes around truth. If you cannot keep pretending, it may be because your spirit has decided that pretense costs too much. Listen. Life is always speaking, and one of the clearest signs that life is turning around is this. You begin to feel less interested in managing appearances and more interested in living in alignment. You begin wanting what is true, even if it is quieter. You begin choosing what nourishes, even if it is not impressive. You begin craving peace that reaches the bones, not just the image. You begin trusting that